Hi there, it's Neil from Diagonal Move here. Beginning turn 11 of Saratoga, we've been doing a playthrough series for this game, which is from the American Revolution tri-pack, published by GMT Games and designed by Mark Miklos. This is going to be most likely the final video in this series, and up to now I've been playing the game predominantly using this solo assistant, which is available separately to the tri-pack that Saratoga is in from the C3I magazine. It's also, I believe, available in some of the later entries in this American Revolution series. It was suggested that I try playing both sides with this table rather than choosing a tactics card, which is these things, for the active side and then rolling for the non-active side. So let's try that today. Let's just try rolling the dice for both sides and see what difference that makes to the game. I haven't tried it before, but let's see how it goes based on that recommendation from one of the viewers of an earlier video in this series. Okie dokie, jumping straight into the initiative roll. No one has any momentum chits to manipulate this, so we're just going to do a straight roll. Okay, it is a 0 for the Americans, a 2 for the British, but we have a -1 modifier for the British, so that is actually a 1 versus 0, further modified on the American side by a +1 modifier, so we're actually at a drawn 1-1 result there. In this circumstances, I believe we roll again. There's no carryover of the initiative from the previous turn as far as I understand it. Yes, both players roll again, just check that in the rules. And here we have a 2 for the British and a 9 for the Americans, which would modify to a 1 and a 10. So definitely the American player starting first in this turn. It's an interesting position for both sides that we find ourselves in at the start of this turn. The Americans have the opportunity to really push hard and reduce the morale of the British down to the point where they actually give up and go home. The options for doing that are predominantly around combat, but we need to get ourselves so that our odds modifiers favour us quite significantly compared to how they favour the British. So there's going to be a limited opportunity there to do that because we have relatively few numbers in Freeman's Farm, which is where most of the combat has been happening, compared to the British and their allied sides. So an interesting position. The British, of course, have to try and weather this storm, and then on their turn, which we'll go on to later on in this video, need to try and do something about winning this game. What that might be at the moment, I don't know. But let's start off with the first phase, which is the movement phase for the initiative player. And here I think we need to think about how we're going to try and secure some of those favourable odds for the Americans. In the game, players or pieces that are next to each other during the combat phase must fight, and that means basically we do have this wide front here on the British side, which is going to really make those odds quite difficult to achieve, because everyone who is adjacent to multiple enemies will have to split their numbers to fight those multiple enemies as best they can. We're still quite static in terms of the American movement at the top here, partly due to the garrisoning limits, and partly because the Americans really don't want to move far from their really quite nice defences up on the top of Bemis Heights there. So, interesting thoughts all round really. I think what we may do is we may try to combine some of these guys against one stack somehow. And let's see if we can't do that using these units here and here. The New York could move to this space, and Latimore's Connecticut Militia, I think that is. Not entirely sure what the CT stands for, but I'm assuming that's what it stands for. I'm not sure if that focused actually there, but we can move here because there's no zone of control. Even if there was, we would still be able to move there and stop. Now underneath that stack of Germans there, we've got von Retz and Prince Ludwig, combined strength of 5, which is currently the combined strength of the New York and the Connecticut militia as well. So that means in order to get a more favourable result, we'll need to move these guys down as well. But that would push us massively overstacked. So we probably won't want to do that. Limited other options then really. I mean, there is the alternative of just moving back again like we did last turn and forcing the British to come to us, potentially fighting at poor odds on their turn, but then that is also potentially quite risky. There's a sizable artillery unit there, strength 5, which will fire on this turn, defensive fire, and in order to move those out of the way we need to really block line of sight. So to minimise that risk, shall we say, we need to block line of sight, which is blocked really in this, imagine if you're looking out this way and this way, it's blocked basically here but not here. It can still hit the people in the trees and it can shoot down the side of the free hex there towards Arnold. All round it is a tricky movement decision for the Americans. I think combining forces in some fashion is going to be the way to go. We'll move the militia 1 to there, the road, negating any terrain modifiers for the other types of terrain in the hex, and then we'll move them again to... No, actually we'll put the New York with the militia rather than the other way around. It's the same effect, but what it does is it frees up this space here to allow us to move these guys in to have that extra oomph against the von Retz stack. Arnold I will also move back. He's rather exposed for my liking compared to, you know, these guys here could quite easily get around the flanks. So let's move the stack for Arnold back on again. Projecting that zone of control into the objective area is still denying a VP to the British, but we're not actually going to win a VP as the Americans if we are just projecting a zone of control, is my understanding. I'll double check that before we finish the game. And finally, the rifle units. To take advantage of the rifle units' rifle fire phase, we do need to be adjacent, which means potentially we could go here and shoot at the Earl of Balcarres. I keep pronouncing that massively, hopelessly wrong, I'm sure. It would give us a decent odds modifier in combat as well, actually. Morgan ignoring any rifle fire penalties because he's stacked with Dearborn. But then that does put him at risk of being surrounded on multiple sides. Okay, but let's do that. I think it's worthwhile because the rifle fire may give us a good result and cause some challenges there for the British. Other movement, probably fairly limited if we're honest. The units up on Bemis Heights, do I really want to move them? I could let the British come to us. Essentially, we're all reasonably well stacked in terms of our defensive numbers and behind fieldworks and upslope, so let's not do any more movement. Okay, that is a long-winded way of saying movement is over. Moving into rally, we need to do a morale check on the American side for just one unit, which is this unit over here, the 5th Massachusetts. It's quite far away for me to see over there, but I believe that's the 5th. And it's not going to focus, is it? But who knows? The typeface says it could be the 5th or it could be the 6th. It's a unit that needs a roll regardless. Okay, having successfully destroyed the dice tower, let's roll a die, hope for a 5+. We get a 2, so even allowing for any morale modification. That is still a disrupted unit up the top there. Okay, cool. Defensive artillery fire. The cannon here is going to shoot at Morgan. There is a strength of 5 for that cannon, which is the Walker artillery unit, and on a strength of 5, a distance of 2, that is a 7+ to hit, and we've rolled a 1. Even with modifiers, that's not going to hit. That's fine from an American point of view. The British are cursing their continuing bad dice rolls, which are really the story of the entire game for the British. Really terrible dice rolls, basically all the time. Rifle fire phase, we are now having Morgan adjacent to the Earl of Balcarres, which I said, and that is going to be a strength of 3. Adjacent is a +4, or a 4+ for Morgan, and that's a 6, which is the story of the game for the Americans. Really good dice rolls when you need them, and that's how you win this game, clearly. Right, but anyway, rolling to hit. So we've rolled to hit, rolling to wound, which is essentially the damage table, and that is an 8. Okay, so we have an 8 against non-artillery, which is this table here, and that is a disrupted result. The Earl of Balcarres is going to have to retreat. Will suffer the disruption, including the morale loss for the disruption. But what's potentially more interesting here, including the fact that we're forcing the disruption, is there's no easy path for that unit of the British to retreat without going through a zone of control or overstacking. It's a 3 strength unit, so it would be overstacked there, overstacked there, overstacked there. Even if we weren't overstacked there, this is a zone of control which they cannot retreat through. Potentially we could go here. That's a 3, so that would be a 6. Yes, so they're going to retreat here. 1, 2, and then 3. They have to retreat towards their priority direction, which for the British is basically this side of the map. And then we pop that counter on, and they're kind of stuck now. So that's good. Now the benefit there, in addition to forcing that unit backwards, adjusting the morale track ever further down, is the benefit is there's this nice wide zone of control for the rifle unit, meaning movement costs will be increased to enter those 3 hexes for the British when the time comes. Okay, cool. I don't think there's any further rifle fire, meaning we move now into close combat, which is when I will start using that solo assistant for both the Americans and the British, regardless of who is actually the phasing player. The only combat we have in this part of the turn is just here in this wooded area outside Freeman's Farm. We have the 6th Massachusetts, or I'm going to say it's the 8th Massachusetts, I'm sorry, it is rather small writing, the 1st New Hampshires, the 2nd New York, and the Latimore Militia, combining against von Retz and Prinz Ludwig. That is going to be an attacking strength of 11 versus 5. Okay, so that is a 2-to-1 for sure. And what we will need to do is roll those 2 dice for the solo assistant. So we will need to first obviously select that lead unit, which are going to have von Retz and the 8th Massachusetts. So they're the lead units. Must not forget that, as I have done so often in the previous videos. So let's choose those tactics chits. Now for the Americans, I don't think we're going to withdraw, and there is no leader, so I believe we are going to be rolling on table number 2, which is this one here in red, as a d6, and we will apply the result. Basically what that does is it just removes the withdraw, so there's 3 options rather than 4 at this point, and that will mean the Americans will stand fast. I won't bother showing the tactics chits, cards even. And for the Americans, or the German allied to the British. For the defenders, which is the Germans allied to the British, we have again engaging without a leader. They might like to withdraw, but they're not going to be able to with that sized unit there. Von Metz is a 4 strength unit, and we have a 3 and a 5 strength. Stacks around them, cannot withdraw into these zones of control. Potential to go there, although it's not the priority direction, it won't break any rules. So with that in mind, yeah, let's roll on the first table, which will give us that 4th option. And it's a 1, so it's a stand fast against a withdraw. And that means we have on our tactical matrix table a stand fast against a withdraw is a no combat. These guys will move back and the units here will move in, or at least one of them will move in, which I'll just move them both for that added strength. Okay, that's not so good for the Americans because there's now all these units against that stack. That's not too good at all right there. That's that mandatory advance after combat. Okay, that is the end of that combat round. There's nothing else to do on the American side. Therefore, we flip this marker down to the British and we take the British turn, starting with movement. They have quite a challenge ahead of them in this turn. They're currently sat on a 2 army morale, which means their individual unit morale is a -2 modifier in combat and in any morale checks. That's really disadvantageous. It truly is. They have 4 units disrupted. They are facing a fairly high morale American side. The British have lost multiple leaders as well. I think there's only 1 leader left in the entire game for the British and their allies. The German leader von Rysdal was also eliminated in the previous turn. So they really have their work cut out for them. I mean, just as a quick note, we have to get 1 unit here or here without zones of control, which means they've got to get those units through that defence on Bemis Heights. That's going to be tough. Or they have to hope that they can inflict enough casualties around Freeman's Farm in order to negate that big pile of red and green counters in the eliminated boxes up on the top left of the screen. I don't think that's going to be too easy to do in either case, but let's see how we go. I think for movement we really do need to try and isolate somebody and try and just really bring as much firepower and combat strength to bear on a unit or a stack of units, just to try and get those modifiers in. The challenge, of course, is Morgan can rifle fire. Their artillery can rifle fire as well. In the later parts of this turn, I think we're just going to have to risk it, aren't we? So we're just going to have to come in here for 2, because we have Morgan's additional influence on the zone of control due to his rifle unit status. I'll bring in von Specht as well, same unit cost or same cost to move. Underneath here we do have a 3 strength and a 2 strength unit. So let's bring the German Grenadiers 1, 2.5 to try and bring some more weight to bear against this stack, and then the 24th with a 2 combat modifier can come with the 62nd to bring some more weight against Morgan's stack. Now, because we have moved both non-artillery combat units out of this hex, that will no longer count as a VP unless we can both clear out the Americans and get a combat unit in there, essentially an infantry unit in there. Right, the artillery. Don't know what to do about the artillery. I think we're just going to leave them there for now. Same with this unit and this stack. The disrupted units, they can move 1 hex apiece in the hope that we can bring them into the game next turn. Let's go here, here, and here. They can only move one hex. Then we have to think about what to do up the top with those units about to cross the river. Now this is tricky because the creek will be a substantial hurdle to get across before we hit the teeth of the cannon as well. I don't know. I suppose this might be a relatively easy target if they're disrupted. So let's do that. Let's move 1 and 2. And to cross there, we're going to have 1, 2. Is there an extra one for the fact that there's a fieldwork behind a creek? No, the cost is for the creek, not for the fieldworks. It's a +0 for infantry over a fieldwork. So it's going to cost us 2, 1 for the creek, 1 for the terrain, 3, and then 4, bringing them to bear on that disrupted unit to try and just get some of my units' morale back by having an easy victory. What we hope will be an easy victory. Here we have artillery, so that'll be 1, 2, 3. That's a road. Now the road negates terrain because fieldworks are actually prohibited for artillery. But there is a road running through there. So does that count as somewhere the artillery can go? An excellent question. So I think it is going to be the 1 to move there and then 2, 3. And then these guys will all come across. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. There's a couple of infantry units and our sole remaining British leader, Phillips. Movement done. The rally phase, we've got to get a +5 for 4 units. So just starting at the top here with this one. Nope. This one. A 5, but then we adjust it by the morale, which is going to be a +1, -2. So that's actually a 4. So no rally for this unit. This unit here. That's a 9, which is -2 plus nothing. So actually that is still a 7, so they do rally, which is fantastic because that does mean the British get a morale point back. So the British now have 3 morale and just the final unit there, which is a 7. -2 for the morale track, plus nothing, that's a 5. They also rally. That is a much better showing for the British and increased their morale no end. Fantastic. Okay. Defensive artillery. Just this one shooting along the hex side to the unit on the top. It is a 4 strength unit, so a 4 strength at a distance of 2 is going to be a 7+ to hit. And no, we have missed completely. That's only a 3, and even with any modifiers, that would not make that a hit. Anything else can shoot. We have a 3 strength unit here. 1, 2, 3. They can see them, I'm sure. So that's going to be another 7+ to hit. I'm sorry. Yeah, a 7+ to hit because it's 2, 2, 3 hexes. And that's an 8. There's nothing there that would prevent or modify that fire. So that's a hit on the 21st Fusiliers. Rolling the dice to wound. And that is a 6, which is a retreat. So they are also pushed back. Right. Rifle fire, just the one rifle fire, which is Morgan, who's again going to shoot at somebody to try and reduce some of that combat strength stacking up against him. And I think here we will actually shoot at von Brecht. So that is a 4+ for a 3 strength unit being adjacent. And we have a 2. No modifiers applicable. They're not like infantry, they're not in a forest. They're not artillery or mounted, so that is a 2 as a final result, meaning there was a miss. Okay, combat. Plenty of combat going on in this part of the turn, starting at the top with the fighting 9th against a disrupted 8th Massachusetts, I think I said it was. Now, disrupted units have modifiers in combat. There is a +1 modifier to the die roll towards the attacker, and then they also defend with half their strength points, rounding upwards, and there are also various results if they receive additional disruption or if a pin is a result. Okay, so the British are essentially trying to pick on an easier target there. So let's work this out, shall we? The fighting 9th have a strength of 4, rounding up. The 8th Massachusetts have a strength of just 2, so that's a 2-to-1. Okay, they are the only unit in the hex, so they both must be the lead units. Let's roll for those tactics chits. The disrupted unit there would love to withdraw, but they can't because they'll either be into a zone of control or they would be into an overstacked area, meaning we will be rolling on the second table for the Americans, which is this one, and it's a d6. So that is a skirmish for the Americans. For the British, again, I'm going to say they're not going to withdraw. They do not have a leader attacking currently, so that's also a d6. And we have 2 skirmishes, so the skirmish and the skirmish is a 0 modifier. But let's roll that die anyway, see what we get. We get a 6 as the baseline. Moving along the modifying table then to work out the modifiers, there's a +1 for the unit morale, but that is modified by the army track, so that is going to actually result in a -1. So the 6 is reduced immediately down to a 5. No defenders or rifle units. There is a disrupted unit defending, so that goes back to a 6. No one is surrounded, no one is ammo depleted or anything like that, so we just add on the... No, we don't add on because it was a 0 result for the tactical matrix and those tactical cards. Moving to the defenders then, we have the close combat DRM of the lead unit's morale, so that's going to be a +1, so that is going to result in a -1 because their defenders will negatively impact that roll. No leaders, no rifle units, no militia, no one's attacking across a field work, we're not surrounded, so ultimately we have a 2-to-1 with a result of 5. And let's see what we got. So a 2-to-1 with a result of 5. The disrupted unit for the defenders retreat. That retreat result for the Americans is really interesting because we are in quite a tricky position there for that unit. We cannot retreat into this hex because not only is it the wrong priority order, which isn't against the rules, but it is in a zone of control, which would be, but we cannot also retreat into this hex here, which would be the logical place to put it, because there is already 6 combat strength in that hex. And even though we are a 2-step unit, and normally what you can do is reduce a 2-step unit down, taking the step loss in order to maintain stacking limits. Unfortunately, we would still be overstacked here, so that 2-step unit becomes captured. meaning that easy target for the British did prove to be an easy target, and we lower down the morale for the Americans and increase it for the British. Some more combats to go. In fact, we have quite a few, really. Well, two, but involves lots of stacks. We have Morgan's guys facing up against the 24th von Specht and the 62nd. In this case, we will have the 62nd as the lead unit and Morgan, meaning we will need to check the odds, which is a 6 for the Americans, a 6-10 for the British, which I believe is going to be a 3-2 for the British. The Americans may retreat, which is going to be a 8-sided dice on the first table on the solar system, which is a 1, so they will withdraw. The Americans, as the attackers, will not withdraw, so we just roll a d6 on the second table, which is a 5. So we have attack and echelon versus a withdraw, and that means a +1 to the combat roll. Cool. Okay, so rolling that combat roll gives us a 1, which is awful, but perfectly according to type for this particular game as the British. And let's roll through the modifiers again. There's no terrain impact, no defending disruption or shattered units, no dragoons, etc, etc, etc. So what we need to do is simply adjust the morale of adjust using the morale of the lead unit, which is a +1 and -1 on the track there, meaning the roll stays at 1 after the attacking modifiers. Defending modifiers, we reduce it by 2 for Morgan's morale, ignoring the rifle fire or the rifle unit modifier because of the stacking of Morgan with Dearborn. Nothing else applies. We have the +1 for the tactics chits, meaning I believe we go to a 0. So it's a 0 on a 3-2 table. So that is going to be a single step loss for the attackers. Ouch. That sucks as the British side. It truly, truly does. Okay, meaning they lose the morale they just gained, and back to where we started as the British, I guess. Okay, so just before I jump to the other combat, I should have moved the fighting knight forward 1 there. But now we get to our final combat of turn 11, which is all these British and Allied guys here against New York and the Connecticut militia. So we have a total of 5 on the defending side, with the New Yorkers being the lead unit. Here we have a total of 6, that's 11, 16. Wow, 16 versus 5. That's going to be 3-1. The Grenadiers are the lead unit. The New Yorkers are the lead unit. Let's roll those dice for the tactics chit. The New Yorkers are probably going to run if they can. Why wouldn't you? So that's going to be a D8. And it's a 6. They don't run. They instead stand fast. Even with a modifier on a solar system, due to the odds, they still stand fast. The British will engage and they will not withdraw. And then on a D6 we have a skirmish. So we have a skirmish versus a stand fast, and that is going to be a -1 to the die roll. Okay, let's roll that die. We have a 5, modifying it by the Grenadiers morale, which is +2, -2, so it stays at 5, minusing 2 for the army morale. The other modifiers do not apply with the exception of the tactics chit, which was a -1 if memory serves. Yep, so that has actually dropped to a 4, and then we start on with the New Yorkers, which is a +1 for morale, so that goes back up to that goes down to a 3 because it's the defenders. There is nothing else applicable, I don't think. The militia doesn't have a negative modifier here because it's not just militia in the combat. So it is a 3 on, I believe I said it was a 3-1. Memory serves, I think it was a 3-1. So a 3 on a 3-1 is a pin. Okay, we've not had too many of those results in this game. Right, no one has got anywhere near their automatic victory condition in this turn, meaning we now move on to turn 12. And we'll roll the die for the initiative. A 7 for the British, a 1 for the Americans, allowing for modifiers. That is a 2 for the Americans and a 5 for the British, so it's still British with the initiative. Oh, that is gonna be tricky, isn't it? That really is. Well, all we can do really is a repeat of what we did the last time. Just try to get some more VPs from losses and captured units. Right. Movement first, though. Let's try and get some of these guys together to try and fight across those fieldworks. So we have a 4 there for the Massachusetts, 5th Massachusetts, I think that is, and then a 6 defense there. We need to get some guys in close. So 1, 2. Here we're going to move these guys 1 and 2. Okay, the artillery are just going to stay put. I don't really feel the need to move those right now, although they possibly would be quite useful to come 1 and 2 to try and supply some defensive fire when the time comes on the American turn. The other movements would be simply to bring in the Earl of Balcarres again, possibly, and you can't go there, okay, so maybe we won't bring the Earl of Balcarres in unless we can get them around the side. Be overstacked. I don't think we can get here. We can try. Be 1, 2, 3.5. No, we can't get there. Okay, that's awkward. Unless we get von Speck to move first, which would just be 1.5, moving out of the zone of control. Would actually be 2.5 because of the extra modifier for the rifle unit zone of control. But that would allow the Earl of Balcarres to come 1, 2, 4. Fantastic. A bit more firepower against Morgan's group. We'll keep the pin. We're planning on doing combat. That's cool. So let's just go straight to the rally phase. But before we do that, let's not go straight to the rally phase. Let's move this unit here, which is von Riesedel's namesake unit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have a significant firepower being brought to bear against Morgan. Then it's the turn of the units that need to rally. So let's make a morale check for those 2 units. Got to be a +5 with the -2 modifier for the poor army morale. That is a 7, which is still going to be a 5+. Awesome. This unit has rallied. The modifying track will move to a +1 while I roll for the next one, and that is a 5. It's a -1, even though it's gone up by +1, it is still a -1, meaning that goes down to 4. Although, having said that, we do have the +1 here, which negates that, meaning it's a 5, so they do rally as well, which means rather nicely for the British, they do go up to army morale points. Might be a little bit late, but at least they're not likely to get utterly trashed this turn in terms of the army morale. It seems like the British are having something of a late game resurgence here in terms of their morale. But before we can do that, we need to do defensive fire for your artillery. We've got a 4 artillery unit there, and we are going to fire against this group, which is the 21st Fusiliers we're going to fire at. It's a 4 strength. They are adjacent, meaning the combat to hit roll for the defensive fire is a 4+, and that's a 9. Definitely hit. To wound is a 3. That's not so good, but we do reduce that army morale by 1. The unit here is going to fire at them, which is the stack containing Phillips. I'm going to fire at the 20th, who are the top unit, and hope we hit Phillips as well while we do it. So that's going to be a 3 at a distance of 2, meaning 7+, which is a 3. No effect there. Okay, no particular change then from that artillery combat. The rifle fire phase, Morgan against the 20th, rolling to hit on a 4+, because they're a strength 3 and they're adjacent, which is a nothing, even allowing for modifiers, no hit there. Jumping into combat. So here we have an attacking strength of 6 versus 6, so that's a 1-to-1. The artillery does not count. And up on that screen, I know it's pretty small to see, it's pretty small for me to read as well. 21st Fusiliers, who are reduced currently, and the fighting 9th against the 3rd Massachusetts and the 7th Massachusetts. For this combat, we'll be rolling for the solo assistant on the red boxes again, engagement without a leader. And the Americans would probably be wise to try to pull back a little bit. So let's see what we get on that table number 1. And it's a 4. So they are going to skirmish. The British will not attempt to withdraw, so they're rolling on a column 2. And that is a 3. So a skirmish and a stand fast. So a skirmish in defence and a stand fast attack is a -1 to the die roll. So rolling that die roll, that is a 5. That will be modified to a 4 for the tactics chit. It will be further modified by the lead unit fighting 9th, which is a +1, -1 for the army track morale. It's going to remain a 4. The nothing else applies right now. However, on the defending unit side, the 7th Massachusetts, who are just the top Massachusetts units, the morale is exactly the same, but it's just the top one, will reduce the number down by a 3, by 1 to a 3. The attacking units are attacking across a fieldwork, so that's reducing it by a further 1, so that's a 2 after modifiers. And I believe that is everything. So a 2 on a 1-to-1 is a disruption for the British. There we go, 1, 2, 3. Disrupted Fusiliers, and we just need to drop that morale track back by 1 as well. -2 modifiers from here on in unless something changes. The fighting 9th do need to do a morale check. which is a 0. So they are retreating. Cannot attack those units again because they were previously in a combat, so we'll just have to attack with the original plan, which was for Phillips's group to attack the Lincoln group. That is going to be a 5 to a 4, meaning that's a 1-to-1. We're across field works again. We will both have leaders this time. Withdraw is certainly possible for the Americans. So the Americans have a leader. The enemy has no leader. The flank, not really. I want to say not possible. Not for the Americans anyway. Withdraw is plausible, meaning I believe we're rolling a d8 on table number 5. And we've rolled a 4, which is a turn flank. The Americans have a leader, they have the British have a leader, they have a flank. They're not likely to withdraw. Therefore, I believe we're rolling on a 10, on column 10 there, table 10, with a d8, which is a 5. So it's a turn flank against a skirmish. Skirmish for the defenders and a turn flank for the attacker results in a -1 modifier. So rolling that die. Okay, so that is a 0, reduced to -1, modified by a further negative because both of those units, I'll just choose the top unit there, which is the 20th. It's got a 0, deducting 2, so that's actually down to -3, I think. Phillips will increase that by 1 to a 1. Sorry, a -2. And then we add on all the modifiers for the defenders, which means we're modifying it down again for being across the field works, which is going to be -3. I'm losing track of my minus numbers here. And that's going to mean a momentum chip for sure for the Americans, but a 0 on a negative number on a 1-to-1 with the result of being an AC. So the attacker is captured. I just need to check whether I automatically capture that leader or not, because there's only there's the choice of capturing a unit. I've just realised I made a complete muddle up there. It is the attacker's choice of which unit to lose, and it is the British attacking, so they do not choose to lose their leader, although I don't think you could probably take that anyway. So we'll just grab that top one, like I said, and that unit is captured. That's the 20th. Just chuck them in that general direction until I sort it out in a minute. Everybody else must make a morale check, which would mean the infantry recruits need to roll a +5. They've rolled a 7, but that is a -2. However, they are lucky because they can use the leadership DRM of Phillips, which is a 2, so they do not need to withdraw. Had they withdrawn, that would have been another disruption result. Okay, so we lost a unit, meaning we need to adjust that morale track as well. Things are going horribly now for the British. Truly, truly horribly. This combat then, so that is a total of 4 plus 6, that's 10 plus 4, that's 14 against 6, which is going to be 2-to-1, I believe. 2-to-1 against the Americans, and the lead unit is going to be, good question, who is the lead unit? The lead unit is going to be von Specht there, purely because they're the only one with any modifier above 0, and they're going to need all the help they can get here. So we have potential for withdrawal from the Americans, although if they do withdraw, they may then struggle to get back in. So let's not withdraw. Let's just stand our ground as the Americans. Roll that d6. That is a 4. So they will stand fast. The attackers will attack with no real intention to retreat or to withdraw, and no leader. So again, another d6. So we've got a stand fast at the moment, plus a attack in echelon. So an attack in echelon with a stand fast is a +1 to this combat. That's a 6 plus the 1 that boosts that to a 7. Adjusting morale will be a +1, -2, so that's back down to a 6. +1 for the unit, -2 for the army track. Nothing else is applicable. Therefore, we move to the Morgan unit, who's going to reduce that with his morale down to a 4. Nothing else applicable, so it's a 4 on a 2-to-1, I think I said, which is a both sides retreat result. So Morgan's going backwards. The von Specht unit is also going backwards. The Dearborn unit here must now roll for their morale check. Let's use the right dice. That is a 0, which is pretty appalling, really. So they also withdraw. Could be worse. It could be worse. Right. The hex is vacated, but the lead unit was retreated, so there's no advance after combat. That's my understanding anyway. So the advance after combat rule says if the defender's hex becomes vacant, the attacker must advance with at least the lead unit if it did not retreat. Other units which participated may advance up to the stacking limit, including units that had to take a morale check and passed. Okay, so the lead unit did retreat, but there are a whole bunch of other units in that combat. So in theory, these guys could come here. That's certainly made life a bit more difficult for the Americans. And I think that is sensible because we do have a large number of units and just one unit of that large number retreated overall. Okay, let's move on to the final combat, which is this combat here. It's underneath this pin. We haven't moved out, so there's no concern there. So again, it's the same thing as before. It's a 5 versus, I believe it was 16, 6, 11, 16, yep, so that's going to be 3-1. The Americans may withdraw, I think. So let's roll that d8. That's an 8. They certainly haven't withdrawn, even with a negative modifier for the numbers. That's going to be an attack in echelon for the Americans. The British will certainly attack. There's no leader, so that's a 4, which is a stand fast. So we have an attack of stand fast with a defense of attack in echelon, which is a -1 to the die roll. That's a 7, reducing that to a 6. Lead units are the Grenadiers and the New Yorkers again. The Grenadiers will +2, -2, meaning there's no effect for morale. The other terrain modifiers and so on don't apply, so we just reduce that number further by the New Yorkers' morale, which is +1. So our final result is a 5 on a 3-1, which is a retreat. So the Americans do retreat and then do the morale check for the Connecticut militia, which is a 7. Wrong colour dice, but we'll let it go. -1 for the fact that the morale of the militia is not great, which is a 6, which is still a positive in terms of morale checks. so they stay put. British turn is done. The British have probably not done enough to win this game unless something fairly drastic happens now with the combats. All right, okay. American turn. They've really just got to hold on and not do anything overly silly in combat. In order to get the VP for the objective area, which is this whole area here, as the Americans, 2 units have to be in adjacent spaces. For the British, the VP is if there is a combat unit other than artillery here with no enemy units or zones of control in that wider area. So it's a bit more difficult for the British. Either way, for the Americans to gain that VP, they've got to move somebody in there and then clear that hex. That's probably not the most straightforward thing to do, because anybody adjacent here is going to be fighting these guys rather than that one. So it may be worth even moving some of these guys out to make sure there's a limited number of people fighting just there. Alternatively, move them in to the zone of control there. But then that's a weak unit, so if we did that, the chances are they'd be pretty challenged in terms of their combat. Okay, let me think about this for a moment. I think we do need to move somebody into this hex as a bare minimum, which means they will be fighting these guys. I'll keep that unit there so that they can take on the might of these 3. In fact, let's put the New Yorkers back in. So that one will fight these 3. This one will fight here, meaning the relevant hex for us is going to be these 2 stacks against that. Let's try and take that VP. The area at the top here, we have a fair number of units, and I don't think I'm going to move any of them. Potentially I could, I suppose, to really try and surround this unit here, potentially really make life difficult for the British. Let's do that actually. We've got a garrison, but we need to keep 1 non-artillery unit in there, so that's fine. So we'll just send the let's send the 1st Massachusetts over the fieldworks and down the hill to be adjacent to the artillery, meaning we could potentially capture those artillery. We've got Lincoln and unit below against Phillips, combining with the 3rd Massachusetts there, and then this unit will be against this unit. Okay, is there anything else we could move down into that? Actually, that's a... Oh, we do. We have a couple here that we could send that way. So we have Massachusetts here, could go 1, 2, 3, no, 1. That'd be 1, 2 because of the slope. No, they can't really get there. I don't think anybody else can easily get there, not in any meaningful way. 1, 2, 3, and 4. These guys can. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. That's a very strong unit now against Phillips, because the defender here can split between the 2 hexes they're adjacent to. Okay, so let's go to the defending artillery. The artillery here cannot hit. The artillery here can hit that unit. They're a strength of 2. They are adjacent. So that's going to be, I think it's something like a 6. Yes, it's a 6. It's a 3. There's no effect there. Yes, I should have done the rally phase before that, but there's no one to rally, so that's okay. We got away with that little faux pas. But the rifle phase will get Morgan shooting at the von Rysdal unit. 7+, or 1. Modifiers won't do anything to that. So combat, last combats of the game. Let's start at the top. So we have a 1-to-1 at the top there. Well, the Massachusetts could withdraw. They do have the option. They rolled a 2, so yep, that is a withdraw for the Americans. The British probably wouldn't want to withdraw, so they're going to roll the 6. That's a 2, so skirmishing against the withdraw is a no combat result. These guys retreat here, and then they move in. They will not be able to commit their combat strength against this unit here, so I'll just move them off to one side to show that and to remind myself that that is the case. No changes on the morale track for that. So then we have, how do I do this? We've got 3, 7 against a 3, so that is a 2-to-1. I could make that a 3-to-1 by adding the 12th Massachusetts in. Let's make that a 3-to-1. The Americans will roll. They do have a leader, but they don't have a flank. The enemy does have a leader, so we're rolling on table number 8, I think, which is a D8. We rolled a 7, meaning we are doing a frontal assault against Phillips. Phillips himself is rolling probably on table 7, the difference being the withdrawal opportunities. And that's a 4, which is a stand fast. So we have a frontal assault against a stand fast, which is a -1 to the die roll. So we have a 7, the -1 brings that to a 6. The attackers' modifiers, we have a 1 for Lincoln and a 1 for the lead unit that is stacked with him. So that's going to be a 7 again, plus the extra 1 for Lincoln, so that is actually pushing that up to an 8. I don't think anything else is particularly applicable right now, and meaning we just adjust the defenders, morale and so on. So that's a 1 for the leader, which would bring that to a 7. But then there's a -2 modifier, so that would actually push that back up to a 9, I think. Yeah, 9. Meaning we have a 9 on a, did I say 3-to-1? I think I did, didn't I? Which is a step loss and a leader casualty. Yep. They have totally destroyed these guys. That's a morale loss, that's a leader casualty, and I believe on that result the unit with the step loss may have to withdraw, or am I confusing that with the AC result? No, they stay put. It's the any other units that would need to make that morale check and potentially move. But we have got a reduction in morale anyway. So we've got a reduction in morale anyway. Finally then, the lead unit here, which is the unit underneath the Massachusetts, so they're not the 12th Massachusetts, but the 1st Massachusetts. They are going to auto-capture the artillery, reducing the morale of the British even further. and requiring that advance. Okay, that is another step loss to the British, whose army morale is now plummeting. Yeah, I bounced around the rulebook a little bit, but the exclusive rules direct you to the army morale section of the rulebook, which says if a morale falls to 0, it's considered demoralized. The game ends immediately, with the opposing side having a substantial victory. So one further loss of morale and the game is over. So let's see if we can do that, shall we? So we have a 6 defending stack here with a 6 12 attack. Let's see if we can't use the top unit there as well, which would be the 8th Massachusetts. So that would be a 15 against 6. So that would be a 3-1. Lead unit will be Morgan, and we will roll the dice. I think the German unit there, the lead unit being von Rysdal, I think they would want to run. So we'll roll the D8 to see if they do that. That's a 2. They are likely to withdraw, depending on, of course, on the result of the combat we're about to do. I said the lead unit was Morgan, but I think I need to actually make it one of these units here. 9th. Let's make it the 9th so we can benefit from Arnold's modifier. Arnold is attacking with obviously a leader. The flank isn't possible. Withdraw, I would say, is probably not possible, meaning it's a D6. We've got a 1 plus the 1 for the fact that they're 3-1 means the attack in echelon against a withdraw. And I believe that means there's no combat. Oh no, there's no combat. That's not good. We really threw all our eggs into that basket there. No, it's attack in echelon against a withdraw is actually a +1. My goodness me, heart in mouth moment there for me. I am easily excited though. Okay, so a +1 to the roll. And the roll is a 7 plus the 1 pushes that to an 8. The modifier for Arnold is a 2, so that goes up to 10. The modifier for the 9th Massachusetts pushes that further to an 11. We then also add on nothing, because we now move to the defender. The morale of the defending unit is 0, -2, so we're now at something like +13 or something, well above the upper limits of this CRT here anyway. And that is everything. So we are at 13, which is going to be a attacker captured. So we captured von Rysdal. And with that loss of morale from the combat, the British army has reached 0 on the army morale track, meaning the British are demoralised. The Americans have won a substantial victory and the game ends immediately. There is no need for me to do any further combats, no need for me to count up any victory points. The game is over, the video is over, and the series of playthroughs is over as well. Thank you for watching this video and for sticking with the entire series if you've watched the whole series this far. The only thing remaining to say then is happy gaming, and I'll see you next time.